Good morning. I'm Paige G. Hart, founder of Spirit Realization Fellowship, and today's message is a deeper look at the Beatitudes. So I will start by reading from Matthew 5. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so before I start going into this, I do want to say that, my take on when I read the scriptures, I try to disregard dogma, doctrine, or what they've taught me at church or anywhere else, and let the Spirit speak to me through the scriptures itself. And I can tell you that some of the things that I am led to believe are not what they teach in the church, sometimes. I'm not saying these things at face value don't have meaning, because of course they do. I mean, literally, yes, they have meaning. When it comes to Jesus' teaching, yes, what he teaches. Because if you know about what we talked about before, some things were added as the story continued to develop, which were trying to, reinforce a certain idea based on Judaism, where they came up with the sacrifice and all that stuff. But I'm just looking at his teachings and how they can apply to our lives. Because as I've said before, the four yogas of Hinduism, which are service and love and study and self-examination, and then meditation and breathing and mindfulness, and those things can all be found in Jesus' teachings as well. And what's important is to know how to apply these to our lives. And like I will further discuss in other messages, the principles of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are universal. It's a universal journey, because even in the Bible, whether it was the Israelites leaving Egypt to go to the Promised Land, or even Jesus when he was when he got baptized by John the Baptist before he started his ministry, there's the desert. Jesus was in the desert for 40 days, and the Israelites were out there forever, because we can't get to the Promised Land without doing the work of deconstruction of our miscreations and false beliefs. So, I'm sure I'm not unique, but when I was new to the path and new to the journey, I really thought that life was about getting what I wanted, and that somehow if I, followed God, that would help me get what I wanted better, and that's just, I love that in the 12 and 12, when it says that most of us have enough humility to go on with the business of being self-satisfied. And so a lot of us are there, and that's why it's important to understand that all this thing requires work. Because when I was new, I really thought that I'm supposed to get what I want. It's supposed to be fun, easy, and pain-free at the same time. So of course I was in for some rude awakenings when I started facing reality. Because what's fun is being living water to others. And if life was easy, we wouldn't learn anything. And if it was pain-free, we wouldn't understand joy, because you can't understand joy without understanding sorrow. You've got to have contrast. And so those are what I know today. But I just wanted to say that because this applies so much to coming to understand that. Because especially any time when he's talking about, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, or being a child of God, these are things that we experience as we break into the kingdom by becoming less, so that the spirit can become more. Our true selves, the Atman, the spirit, can embody us fully, where our egos are subservient to it. Our egos are our personality, and if you live in this world and think you're a separate individual, you've already been duped, and we've all been duped. But we're not responsible for our programming, but we are responsible for facing our programming and dealing with it and reprogramming with truth. That's the essence of A Course in Miracles. That's the essence of 4th step work in a 12-step program. That's the essence, is to find the lies we have based our whole lives on, and rip those out and replace them with truth. So let's start with blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs are the kingdom of heaven. And I've already said, the Spirit is within us. Jesus said the kingdom is within you. And he talks about the pearl of great price or the faith of a mustard seed. So the bottom line is it's in us, but it's buried and it's covered. Just like he said too, if the light in you is darkness, how dark is that? And so that's how we're born in a state of amnesia, oblivious to who and what we really are. And we're all born that way. And we're born that way for a reason, because constructing these egos sets the template or the architecture for spirit to fill. And so if you don't have a developed ego, you can't really feel it. So it's not that it's bad that we have egos. We just have to understand that our egos are not who we really are. They're our identity that we think we are and our self-image. But so to be poor in spirit is to come to a place where something's up. Because I know I've met people, there's this awesome minister in the colony, John Featherston. He's got Serenity Church, and I love him because he always says that he never trusts anyone that hasn't been broken. And that's the deal. Some people come running to God really just because someone told them if they didn't, they're going to go to hell or whatever reason. But those of us who turn to God for a change of mind and heart, that's what the true definition of repentance is to turn to God for a change of mind and heart. So those of us who finally hit the wall, just like in Course in Miracles, how it all became about was the lady and her partner, they were thinking there has got to be a better way. And they started seeking answers for that. And then, of course, the Course is the answer. So that's the deal, is to really start the journey. You've got to be seeking something. You've got to be seeking a change. And what we all have to understand, if we're seeking a change on the outer, that's temporary. Give me more money or make me beautiful, whatever. When we pray for things in the outer, we're missing the whole point, because God answers our prayers from the inside out. I'm one of those people that I used to always dream of having a husband and a family, because I grew up without that. I grew up without a family, really, and I always wanted one. But I was the kind of girl that when my boyfriend goes to work, my ex-boyfriend comes over. So it took many, many years for me to change on the inside enough to be a person who could become a wife. I liked being a bride at weddings, but I didn't understand what it meant to be a wife. And that's why I've been married 3 times. But the third one was a charm. And I learned what loyalty and commitment were all about and what marriage is. So I can't have that till I'm changed enough to understand the principles behind what I'm asking for. And so that's why sometimes it seems like God's not answering or he's not hearing our prayers, because he's just changing us if we'll let him. Because the bottom line of what I was saying is we're asking for a change. The only real change that means anything is the change that goes on within us. So when he talks about being poor in spirit, it's understanding that there's something in you that's blocking you from the abundance. Jesus came to bring the abundant life. And so if you're not having an abundant life, and I don't mean, if you have an abundant life on the inner, it's going to manifest in the outer as well. But we're not talking about the outer, because this is an inside job that starts within. And so it comes for those who realize something's up. And of course the actions that have to be followed by that, or to make a rigorous effort, as the big book says, to face and be rid of the causes and conditions that block us from God. And it's not, the big book says it's all because we're selfish. Selfishness and self-centeredness, we get to find out we're selfish and self-centered, but that's because of our preconditioned beliefs. So we have to go deeper. We have to go to the root to see what those conditioned beliefs are. Mother Teresa said, you can't fill what's already full. And so when we're already full of old ideas and all that kind of stuff, we have to be willing to let go. And so it's that place of being open to the fact that something's got to give, and it's going to something within us. And then blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I have been through things like my daughter getting shot and my precious nephew dying of an overdose, and things that have just broken my heart. And so obviously God is the comforter. Just like I've said in that message about my daughter's shooting, I was more afraid. It was more horrible to spend a year being afraid of her getting shot than the reality of her getting shot, because Grace was with me when she actually got shot. So yes, God, the Holy Spirit, is the comforter that's there for us in times of need. But to take this deeper, we have a joke, people say, how are you doing? I'm fine. And, in the program, they say that that's effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, because we all go around fronting. We're all too blessed to be stressed and all that kind of stuff. And we're not owning our suffering. And the only way to truly know joy is to get through your sorrow and your pain. And so that's the thing. We're pain avoidant. I mean, most addicts, that's what they'll be diagnosed with, pain avoidant. Because that's what we use. We didn't want to feel the pain, and we found something that made us feel better. But we got to learn how to find that sense of ease and comfort that comes without taking a drink, without using drugs. Because that's what it's all about. Because this is all within us. Everything we need is inside of us, but we have to know how to get there. Just like the Big Book says, we have to have access to a power greater than ourselves. And this work and these teachings help us. The thing about Jesus' teaching and the Holy Spirit, not only does He give us the teaching, He gives us the jump start in our spirit to help us actually do these things and to guide us through it. So, it's not pretending to be okay when we're not okay. It's not being afraid to feel your pain. I have spent so many hours in the fetal position, bawling my eyes out over some of my childhood issues. It's not even funny. And I have sat in my car screaming my head off to release some anguish and pain to the point that I was hoarse. You've got to feel this stuff. What you resist persists. Emotions they're not infinite. They have an end. And once you start feeling that, everybody who has ever experienced depression knows that the worst thing about depression is you feel like you're always going to feel that way. And so when we suffer, our mind's going to tell us, "Oh, bad. No, this is not good." And we're not going to want to feel the pain and try to avoid it. But once you feel it, it has an end. It has a time. I love what Joe Biden said, because he lost his daughter and his wife in a car accident. And he said that eventually, when he thinks of them, instead of sorrow, he has joy and gratitude of the memories. And that's what we have to let God do with us, is bring the pain through so we can give thanks and rejoice for this. Khalil Gibran said, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. So to have understanding, we have to experience the full range of our emotions. And that's the problem. In a world of seeming duality, it seems like things are either good or bad, black or white, opposites, when the reality it's a continuum. And our job is to get in the middle. But we have to get there by deconstructing our ego to lower those mountains, and feeling our pain to raise those valleys so we may find the way. When John the Baptist said, prepare the way of the Lord, that's what he said. The mountains will be lowered and the valleys will be raised. This is the way of the Lord. This is how we become heart-centered within our whole being, that all the chakras align to open, that we may be beings of love, light, spirit, and joy. Now, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And to inherit the earth, to me, means just like our whole lives have been created on false beliefs. I've heard so many fifth steps, and I haven't met anybody that their core fear, their core belief is that they don't matter, that they're insignificant. And that's why my new book is called Delusions of Insignificance, because we're under a delusion if we think we're insignificant. But most of us are programmed that way. And so what we've created in our world is a world where these false beliefs seem real to us, and then we look for that, and therefore reality mirrors our belief system. And to inherit the earth is to understand that we can let go of the lies and choose truth, to miscreate as opposed to create as opposed to miscreating with lies. And when we create with love, we become co-creators with God. When we believe in good things, we look for good things. Just like I said about seeing Jesus' teachings being applicable to Hinduism as well, or Hinduism being in Jesus' teachings, if you look for it, you can find it. But if you've been told, oh no, you better accept Jesus, you're going to go to hell, you're going to be in big trouble, he loves you so much, but you're going to be in big trouble if you don't accept him, you're going to look for that's fear-based. And you're going to see the fear, because that's what you believe. And so to inherit the earth is to understand that we create our reality based on our belief systems. And when we create with love and joy and things that are eternal, we live in the kingdom, because that will seem like the only world to us. I know what it's like to live in a world of darkness, but see only beauty, not at all times. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's what it means to inherit the earth. So what is being meek? Well, obviously meekness is humility. And, and I love the 12 and 12 because it talks about, humility becomes more than a force feeding on humble pie. Because humility and humiliation are not the same thing. Humility, it's just like it says in the 12 and 12, is making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. And so just like all of these, the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So all of these teachings are ways to unleash those qualities within us so that we may live that in our lives, that we may be a city on a hill that can't be hidden. And so that's what humility is knowing even if we're one with God, God's always infinitely greater. This is an infinite journey, and I don't care how far you get, God is infinitely greater. I have climbed so many mountains and theoretically, metaphorically, thrown myself at the top and thought, finally I've arrived, only to look up and see a sign that says begin. And so many times it's like, oh my gosh, every accomplishment, every ending, which seems like I finally got there, is really just a new beginning. Because the thing with God, our understanding, it's like a kaleidoscope. We may see it and then we sneeze and it's a different picture. And we have to find it all over again, every day. That's why we have to seek God daily. We have to have our daily bread, and trust me, you can't live on yesterday's realization of God. So you got to seek and you got to be fed and you got to find God every single day of your life. And of course, the way we do that is through meditation and prayer and journaling and self-examination and accountability with others and all the wonderful things you learn in the program. Now, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. And that, hunger and thirsting for righteousness is wanting to do what is right, is wanting to do God's will. It's really the same thing as before. And that's where you can't underestimate the power of studying as well. Because praying and meditating in Hinduism, that's just one path and you can get there. Just like you can get there through service, you can get there through love, and you can get there through self-examination and study. But Jesus requires that from all those things from us, because that's the path to abundant living, is where you're practicing. You got all four of these things running in your life. And so studying scriptures, and I don't mean just Christian scriptures. I try to read something out of the Dhammapada or the Hindu scriptures or the Tao, as well as the Bible, every day. I like to read Deepak Chopra. I want to stay balanced in my understanding. I'm not going to get off on just one path and say this is the only way, because there's one truth practiced well can get you there. You can have ideas about a million truths, but just one truth practiced with sufficiency will help you grow and make progress. And so doing them all, the sky's the limit. It's unlimited potential for growth. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Well, that's what goes around comes around. That's karma. Because Jesus also says, with what measure you meet, so shall you be measured. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Because here's the bottom line. We don't treat people the way we want to be treated. We treat people the way we treat ourselves. And so first and foremost, you need to have some mercy on yourself. That's the deal. Is if we do something, if it checks inside of us, wow, I wish I hadn't done that. And that's why evening review is so important, to review your day and ask yourself, what could I have done differently? And then to pray and say, hey, next time help me do it this way. Because that's always, just like as a chemical dependency counselor, we teach people about strategies. It's like, okay, these are your triggers, so what are you going to do? And in that case, avoid your triggers for starters, but especially emotional triggers. If anger is a trigger, then you've got to learn strategies for managing your anger. If being depressed is a trigger, you've got to learn strategies for managing your depression. So we all have to have strategies. And so what we have to understand first is we are forgiven is if we're sorry. It's that simple. And because forgiven is to be given the truth for error. And when we're justifying bad behavior, that's an error. But when we finally go, yeah, I have to admit that's wrong. Okay, there you go. You face the truth about that. So then the question is, what are you going to do next time? In that you can ask for an intuitive thought. How would I handle this the next time? And if you're not doing that on a daily basis, you can start rationalizing. You can start resting on your laurels. I'm a very lucky person because this thing begins with hope, and it's all about not resting on your laurels. And my kids' names are Hope and Laurel. And of course, I did not plan that because I did not know these things when I named them, but it's very good reminders for me. So we don't want to rest on our laurels. We always want to keep seeking. We always want to understand that we have to forgive ourselves first so we can forgive others, that we are forgiven. And that we have to treat ourselves with mercy so we can be merciful to others. Treat ourselves with non-judgment so we can be non-judgmental towards others. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Like I was just talking about duality really being a spectrum. Through prayer and meditation, especially the kind of deep meditation where you really focus on a mantra. My mantra is, rise, risen Jesus, rise. So every time when I meditate, I set a timer. For every 2 minutes, the bell goes off, and I recite the mantra, which brings me back to that place within myself of stillness. It's in those places that we become pure of heart. Because to become pure of heart is to remove the things that block you from your heart, from love. Just like in Course in Miracles, to face the things that block us from the awareness of love's presence. And then blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We are created in the image and likeness of God, and that which we can create with our thoughts. But our thoughts, if they are not true, we create nightmares. So to be a real peacemaker, besides what it means in the outer, is to practice kind thoughts, practice loving thoughts. I live in Texas, in the United States of America, and we are going through our society is really having some problems right now. And sometimes I feel very angry about it. But I took my anger because I know being mad is not the solution. And I asked the Spirit, what do I do with this? And he said, every time you start to get angry, you say, God's got this, thy will be done, and then you pray for whoever it is that happens to make you angry. You pray. Bless those. Love your enemies. You pray for your enemies. And they're not your enemies. It's the people that feel antagonistic in your life. And so that to me that's what being a peacemaker is, to not allow yourself to be hardened by hate or fear. Just like everybody's scared to go to Walmart now. Walmart is difficult because they only have one lane open these days, but they do have cheap prices. And so if you want to save money, sometimes you got to go to Walmart. And so I'm not going to stay out of Walmart because I'm afraid of getting killed. I'm just going to trust God. And I'm going to send peace and love wherever I go. So God bless the Walmarts and the Targets and the stores where we all like to shop to save money, because we can't hunker down in our homes because we're afraid of violence in the streets. My family's a victim of gun violence, so I have very strong opinions about that. But that's just my opinion. I don't have a right to inflict my opinion on others, but I can sure as heck pray about it, because that's where the power comes from. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Once again, yes, you may be persecuted or called to square. A lot of people, when they get in recovery and stop using, they realize that their friends who they used with weren't really their friends. And all of a sudden their friends start that, they think they're better than me, that they're sober. No, they think, I used to do that too, thinking other people thought they were better than me. And then finally it dawned on me, you don't know what they think. You think they're better than you because they're sober and you're not. And so we can't get into all that, but on a deeper level, just like I talked about evening review, if you're a human being on planet Earth, which I assume is who's listening to this, you're going to struggle with yourself. I struggle with myself daily. I come up with hot ideas that aren't good ideas all the time. And thankfully, I have someone inside me who says, check, let that go. Don't say that. Mind your own business. But it's the struggling I do with myself every day of realizing, I still don't have this. I still don't have this to perfection. Practice makes progress. And I do love that, because there's no such thing as perfection in an infinite reality. We are perfection in our truest self. But as far as walking this thing out perfectly, nobody can do that. No matter how hard you practice. Like I said, God's infinitely greater. You're always going to have more to learn. This is a never-ending learning process. It's a school from which we never graduate as long as we're on the planet. And so that, to me, is to be persecuted for righteousness' sake. Is to do those evening reviews and to sit with my actions, to sit with my thoughts, to check my words, and to acknowledge when they're not living up to the glory of God. Because only through that can I change. If I start thinking I know it all, then I get where I don't know anything. Because I become complacent and frozen once again, and a new idea has become a solidified belief. And this thing has to stay fluid. So I just want to end, I'm going to say a prayer in a minute, but there's that slogan, happy, joyous, and free, in the program. And in lieu of everything I've just said, one thing I've learned is that happiness is a byproduct of right living. It's of being righteous, thought, word, and deed, righteousness. And that my joy is my sorrow unmasked, as Khalil Gibran would say. Because I have never known joy until I learned to endure my sorrow. And freedom is doing what is right because I want to. Not because I'm being forced to, or I'm afraid if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble, but because I want to. I want to live by God's will. So now let's just settle in for a moment of prayer. Holy Spirit, we thank you that whenever two or more are gathered, you're in the midst of us. So we thank you that you're in the midst of us now, as well as that you're within us. And we ask you, Lord, to help us become empty of ego, to be willing to face and be rid of the things within us that block us from joy. We ask you to help us be willing to face our pain, not to hide or cover it, but to face it and to let it have its way with us and teaching us about joy as well. We ask you to give us the willingness to live according to the way of life, love, truth, and spirit. We ask you to give us an attitude of honesty, tolerance, and love for you and each other. We ask you to light us on fire with a hunger for your way, to be willing to study, to be willing to make our inner world bigger than our outer world. You have given us a kingdom, and we ask that we may have the fullness of that kingdom in our lives. We pray, Lord, that you help us to be merciful, not only with ourselves, but with others, to treat people like we would want to be treated, and to treat ourselves like we want to be treated. We ask you to grow us in prayer and meditation, that we may be pure in heart, that we may know your voice, that we may hear your voice, that you may be our personal guide and teacher. We ask you to monitor our thoughts, words, and deeds, that we may be peacemakers in this world, peacemakers in the higher realms, peacemakers in the invisible world. We ask you that any time we become overwhelmed with anger or fear or resentment, that we remember that you've got this and ask for your will and not ours. And Lord, we thank you for the ability to examine ourselves on a daily basis. And we thank you for your guidance that checks our spirit, that teaches us to have the humility to seek every day to know you, and to die daily to the things that block us from your joy. For you are the way, you are the truth, and you are the life. And may we find that now in your presence. Amen. Namaste.